You won't believe what happened to little Anna, just 10 years old, when she went to the hospital with stomach pains. A little girl of just 10 years old, full of dreams, innocence and joy. Everything seemed normal. Until one day she woke up with a strange pain in her stomach. Her parents thought it was just colic. But when the pain got worse, they rushed her to the hospital. And what the doctors discovered shocked the entire team. This is the story that many tried to silence. But it needs to be told. If you believe that some stories need to be given a voice, like it now. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the next ones. Now take a deep breath, because what comes next will touch you. Anna was a child like any other. She liked to play with her favorite doll, loved to color and dreamed of being a veterinarian. She lived with her parents in a simple but loving home. She had never had any major health problems. Until that day. It all started with a slight abdominal pain. At first her parents thought it was something she ate. But the pain didn't go away. In fact, with each passing hour it got worse. Anna could no longer get out of bed. She cried in pain and said that she felt like something was growing inside her. Frightened, her parents immediately took her to the nearest hospital. Anna was one of those children who charmed everyone, shy but always smiling. She lived in a small town, one of those where everyone knew each other by name. She was the youngest daughter, raised with great affection by her parents, Julio and Mariana, a simple but loving couple. Anna's routine was calm. She woke up early to go to school, where she was one of the most diligent students in her class. She loved science and always said she wanted to take care of sick animals. Her mother was proud of her daughter. And her father did everything he could to give her the best, even with little money. Everything was going well, until one Wednesday morning something changed. Anna woke up complaining of pain. At first, her parents thought it was just a feeling of indisposition. She must have eaten something heavy yesterday, said Mariana. But in the afternoon, Anna didn't want to eat. She said she felt a strange weight in her stomach. Her mother put her to rest. But at night the pain got worse. She began to sweat coldly and writhe in bed. "It hurts, Mommy, it hurts a lot," she said with tears in her eyes. Her father called the hospital, but since the town was small, there was only one doctor on duty at night. Even so, they rushed there. At the emergency room, the doctor on duty quickly examined Anna. He thought it was strange. Her belly was slightly swollen, which was unusual for a child her age. He gave her an injection to relieve the pain and recommended that, in the morning, she be taken to a larger hospital in the neighboring town. And so it was done. The next day, Anna's parents took the 6 a.m. bus and headed to the central hospital. During the journey, Anna was quiet. Wait. Her mother held her hand tightly, while her father tried to hide his nervousness by looking out the window. Arriving at the hospital, they were seen by a very experienced pediatrician, Dr. Camila. Dr. Camila listened carefully to the symptoms and decided to admit Anna immediately for more in-depth tests. She said, "I want to do an ultrasound, a complete blood count, and a CT scan. This needs to be investigated carefully." While Anna was taken for the tests, her parents stayed in the waiting room. The mother prayed quietly. And the father, nervous, paced back and forth. After a few hours, the tests began to be analyzed. And it was at that moment that the tension in the air began to increase. One of the residents called Dr. Camila to see the images. The doctor looked at the screen with a serious expression. "This is not common," she murmured. "Call the person responsible for the image. I want a second opinion." The specialist arrived, looked carefully, zoomed in on the images, compared them with the blood tests. And then everyone's eyes turned to the screen. What they saw there was something none of them expected to see. Dr. Camila stared at the images. Her face showed something that Anna's parents would never forget: concern. She then called another doctor from the pediatric ward to analyze them together. 3 specialists spent more than 40 minutes comparing exams, reviewing the images, discussing in low voices. In the meantime, Anna had already been taken back to the room. She was drowsy because of the medication, but she still complained of the same pain, now more intense than ever. Mariana, the mother, couldn't stop crying. The father, Julio, held back his tears, trying to be strong, but inside, he was falling apart. They didn't know what was happening. And that was the most desperate part. Almost 2 hours later, Dr. Camila entered the room with a serious expression. She sat down next to Anna's bed and examined her again with even greater care. Then she asked her parents to accompany her to the meeting room. Mariana's heart almost jumped out of her chest. She knew that when a doctor calls for a private conversation, it's usually not a good sign. In the room, the two doctors looked at the parents and said, "We found something unusual. But before giving any diagnosis, we want to perform one more specific exam, something more detailed to be sure of what we're seeing." The father, confused, asked, "But, will my daughter be okay?" The doctor looked at him for a second. There was a pause. And then she answered in a calm but firm tone, "She's stable. But we need to act quickly." That night, Anna underwent a high-precision ultrasound. The exam took a long time, and the tension only increased. While they waited for the results, the parents tried to remain calm. Deep down, they knew that something serious was about to happen. But never, not even in their worst nightmares, could they have imagined what was about to be revealed. A little before 11 p.m., the exams were ready, and that was when everything changed. Dr. Camila entered the room with an envelope in her hands. With slow steps she approached, and from her expression, you could already tell that this was not something simple. She asked them to sit down. "What I'm going to say now may shock you, but you need to be prepared." And so, she began to explain, image by image, detail by detail. Then a nurse called Dr. Camila and said that it was an emergency. Dr. Camila then left the room again without finishing the news. Time in the hospital seemed to stand still. Anna had already undergone several tests and was still lying down, with a swollen belly and still in pain. Her mother, Mariana, was sitting next to her, smoothing her hair and trying to stay calm. Her father, Julio, was pacing the hallway, waiting for some clearer news from the doctors. Finally, Dr. Camila came back. She was carrying a clipboard and an expression that immediately caught the parents' attention. She asked to speak to them in private outside the room. There in the hallway, the doctor took a deep breath before saying anything. "The test showed something that surprised us. It's not an infection nor a common gastrointestinal problem," she began. The parents looked at each other in silence. "Mariana." "Julio," she continued, carefully using her words, "Anna's body is showing clear signs of pregnancy." The shock was immediate. Mariana's eyes widened. She took a step back and held on to her husband's arm to keep from falling. The father remained silent, as if he hadn't understood what he had heard. "What do you mean?" he asked, almost voiceless. "That's not possible. She's only 10 years old." The doctor then explained that the ultrasound revealed the presence of a developing fetus. It was an advanced pregnancy, already close to delivery. Mariana was in despair. She began to cry, babbling words that not even she could understand. This is a mistake. It can't be. My daughter is just a child." The doctor confirmed that the tests were correct. The baby's heartbeat was there. There was movement. There was life. It was then that Anna's father asked the question that no one wanted to hear out loud. Who did this to my daughter?" From that moment on, the case was no longer just a medical emergency. Now it also involved the police. The hospital management was notified, and a social worker was called to monitor everything closely. But the scariest part was yet to come. During the preparation for the birth, while they were organizing all the tests, one of the doctors noticed something different in the baby's images. They called another obstetric specialist to evaluate the case. Dr. Camila returned to the room and said, "We need to talk. We discovered something unusual. Something we've never seen before in a pregnant child." What she was about to reveal would leave everyone in the hospital in shock. The news of Anna's pregnancy spread quickly within the hospital. The staff looked at each other in the hallways, surprised, unable to understand how this could be real. A girl of only 10 years old, about to give birth. Meanwhile, her parents remained in shock. Mariana couldn't stop crying. She asked herself repeatedly how this had happened without her noticing anything. Anna was a calm, studious child who never showed any signs of changing her behavior. She always played with her dolls, slept in her own room. Nothing indicated that something so serious was happening. Her father, Julio, remained silent. But in his eyes there was a mixture of pain and anger. He wanted answers. He wanted justice. And above all, he wanted to understand how his daughter, still a child, had gotten pregnant. The doctors in turn decided to act quickly. Since the pregnancy was already at an advanced stage, and Anna had been experiencing constant pain, the team decided to perform a series of more detailed exams before deciding on the type of delivery. That was when the head obstetrician, Dr. Enrique, noticed something unusual in the most recent exams. He called Dr. Camila aside and pointed to one of the ultrasound images. "Look at this. The fetus looks healthy, but this formation next to it, it's not normal." The image showed a kind of shadow in Anna's abdominal region, very close to the baby. Something that hadn't been seen in the previous exams. Dr. Enrique urgently requested an MRI to better understand what was happening. While the exam was being performed, the doctors avoided giving the parents any information. They didn't want to alarm them further until they were sure of what they were seeing. Hours passed. The MRI was carefully analyzed by the entire team. And when the reports arrived, the room where the doctors were gathered was silent for several minutes. One of the specialists looked at his colleagues and said, "This doesn't make sense." The images showed not only the baby, but another structure lodged next to the uterus. A structure that looked like a living mass, but that had no heartbeat or movement of its own. Dr. Camila, confused, said, "I've never seen anything like this. Never. We're not just dealing with a case of early pregnancy. There's something else inside this girl's body." And it was then, with the team already preparing for the surgery, that the doctors made the decision. We need to open it up. We need to see with our own eyes what's happening. And at that moment, without anyone knowing yet, the truth was about to be revealed. A truth so absurd and frightening that it would change the life of that family forever. The dawn was already taking over the hospital when the preparations for the birth began. The doctors decided to perform a cesarean section, since Anna did not have the body structure to have a natural birth. She was taken to the operating room still drowsy but conscious, asking quietly why so many people were looking at her like that. Mariana was not allowed to watch the procedure, but she stood at the door of the room with her eyes fixed, as if she could protect her daughter with the power of her mind. She was no longer crying. Now what could be seen on her face was an empty, almost paralyzed expression. Julio remained further away, leaning against the wall in the hallway with his fists clenched and his jaw clenched. The police had already been called. A police officer and a social worker were on their way to the hospital. But none of that mattered now. The focus was on Anna. And what was about to happen inside that room? It was something none of them would ever forget. Dr. Camila had the team assembled. Dr. Enrique, the obstetrician, would conduct the operation. The monitors were already in place, and everyone was waiting for the anesthesiologist's signal to begin. The silence inside the room was absolute. Everyone knew that, in addition to the medical responsibility, there was something different there. Something out of the ordinary. The scalpel slid over Anna's small abdomen with precision. Every movement was made with extreme care. The incision was opened and the first tissues were pulled apart. And it was then, at that exact moment, that Dr. Enrique's eyes widened. He stopped, looked at the image on the monitor and, without realizing it, let out an almost imperceptible whisper. "My God." The team looked at each other. Dr. Camila approached and looked over the surgical shield. What she saw also made her take a step back. There was something there. Besides the baby. Something strange. A structure that seemed connected to the uterus, but was not part of the pregnancy. She looked at the obstetrician and asked in a low tone, "What is that?" Dr. Enrique didn't answer. He just continued the operation, now with more caution. The baby was fine. But that other formation, it was impossible to ignore. The tension in the room increased with each passing second. Anna's heartbeat was stable. The baby was starting to be removed. And at that moment, while the newborn's weak cry echoed through the room, the doctor's eyes returned to that other mass that remained there, still wrapped in a membrane, looking so abnormal, that even the most experienced professionals remained silent. It was then that Dr. Enrique said, "After we stabilize Anna and the baby, we'll have to remove this and send it for immediate analysis. Because honestly, I have no idea what it is." The baby had been successfully removed. A boy weighing just over 2 kilos, breathing with some difficulty but alive. He was immediately taken to the neonatal incubator, where a specialized pediatric team was already on standby. Anna, still under the effects of the anesthesia, was fast asleep, unaware of what was happening around her. Inside the operating room, however, the mood was not one of relief. There were no smiles or celebration. The doctor's attention was now focused on what remained inside Anna's womb. Dr. Enrique approached again and began to carefully remove the tissue around the mass. Dr. Camila, with a trembling voice, broke the silence. "This doesn't look like a cyst or a tumor. It looks like something organic but deformed." The eyes turned to the monitor where the surgical camera projected images in real time. That formation seemed to be connected to the uterus by a kind of fibrous cord, and was covered by a gelatinous, almost translucent membrane. But the most disturbing thing was what could be seen inside that membrane. A structure that vaguely resembled the shape of a small body. Incomplete. Half-developed. Dr. Enrique stepped away for a moment, took off his gloves and asked, "Call the head of pathology and prepare an immediate biopsy. This needs to be analyzed now." Meanwhile, outside the room, Mariana and Julio were still waiting for news. The baby's crying could be heard for a brief moment, and this brought a wave of emotion mixed with anguish to the mother. She looked at her husband and asked, "Did you hear?" He cried, "Our grandson?" Or, she didn't finish the sentence. It was as if she was still trying to understand the reality they had been thrown into. The police chief arrived a few minutes later, accompanied by the social worker. He went straight to Julio and Mariana and in a formal tone said, "As soon as the girl is conscious, we will need to talk to her." Calmly. "But we need to understand what happened. She is pregnant. Someone did this to her." The social worker approached, touched Mariana's shoulder and said softly, "Anna's priority now. She's going to need a lot of psychological support, and so are you." At that moment the doctors left the room. Dr. Enrique was pale, his gaze lost. He approached the parents and said, "The baby is fine. He was taken to the neonatal ICU. But we found something besides the baby. Something we're still trying to understand. A formation. Unusual." Julio frowned. "A formation? What does that mean?" "It means there was something else in there," the doctor replied. "We don't know what it is yet. But it's already been sent for analysis. As soon as we have the results, we'll explain everything clearly." The parents looked at each other, not knowing what to think. It all seemed like a never-ending nightmare. But nothing, absolutely nothing, would prepare them for what was about to be revealed in the next few hours. Because inside that room, something was removed from Anna's body that defied logic, medicine, and reality itself. The pathology lab went on high alert. The removed material was isolated in a sterile capsule and sent by one of the most experienced technicians. There was an air of urgency in the hallways. It wasn't just scientific curiosity. Something was wrong. Something that no one could explain. Dr. Roberto, head of pathology, received the sample. When he saw the first images of the formation, He frowned and immediately called two colleagues who were experts in embryology. The structure looked at first glance like a malformed fetus. But what worried them most was the partial symmetry, as if there had been an interrupted attempt at replication. It wasn't a simple malformation. It seemed deliberate. Incomplete, yes, but with an intention behind its existence. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Anna was beginning to wake up. Her eyes opened slowly, her gaze still lost, but she soon found Mariana's face, who was holding her hand tightly. "Mom?" she murmured, confused. "The baby?" Mariana smiled with tears in her eyes. "He's alive, my love. He's fine." The relief in Anna's eyes lasted only a few seconds. Then her expression darkened, as if something had returned to her memory. She put her hand to her belly and in a barely audible whisper she said, "There was someone else there." Mariana looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Anna didn't answer. She turned her face away, her eyes fixed on the white ceiling. She knew what she had felt during her pregnancy. The constant nightmares, the feeling that something was watching her from the inside, the inexplicable cold she felt even on hot days. On the lower floor the test continued. The preliminary results indicated that the tissue analyzed had genetic traits identical to Anna's, but also to the baby's. As if, somehow, a duplication had been initiated but interrupted. One of the specialists said, his voice breaking, "This is not just a fetal malformation. It is a failed attempt at symbiosis." Dr. Roberto looked at the monitor and replied, "Or something trying to grow, based on something we don't understand." In the observation room, Dr. Enrique was receiving the reports in his hands. He read them in silence, turned to Camila and said, "We can't let this get out of here." "Not yet." She agreed. There was a lot that still needed to be investigated before the truth would be revealed. Outside the hospital, night was falling. Julio paced back and forth while Mariana remained seated, head down. The social worker returned with the police chief. Both were more serious than before. "We need to talk to Anna," said the police chief. "There are signs that this pregnancy was not consensual. But there's more." He hesitated for a moment, then continued, "We received an anonymous tip 3 months ago, saying that she was being watched. That something strange had been happening since she disappeared for 3 days at the beginning of her pregnancy." Mariana looked up, startled. "That's impossible. She's never been away from home and she's never told us anything about it." "Maybe because she doesn't even know for sure what happened," said the assistant. "The mind can block out very intense traumas." In the recovery room, Anna was now alone. She looked out the window, tears streaming silently. Her reflection in the glass seemed different. For a moment he swore he saw a second pair of eyes behind his own. But when he blinked he was alone again. Or so he thought. Because in the lab, beneath layers of microscopy and genetic analysis, something began to pulse. The tissue that had been isolated was regenerating. In the analysis center, the silence was broken by a subtle alarm. One of the sensors detected an unusual change in the sample. One of the technicians approached to check, believing it to be a calibration error. But when he looked through the microscope, his expression changed instantly. "Dr. Roberto, the tissue, it's moving." The head of pathology dropped the report in his hands and ran to the station. What he saw made him freeze inside. The cellular structure, previously inert, now showed clear signs of electrical activity. Microscopic impulses ran through the sample, as if nerves were trying to reconnect. "This is no ordinary regeneration," he murmured. Beside her, a graph showed rhythmic oscillations similar to a heartbeat. But that wasn't a heart. In the hospital, Anna had another abrupt awakening. She sat up in bed, panting as if she had emerged from a deep nightmare. Her eyes were wide open and for a few seconds she didn't recognize where she was. "He's back," she said without thinking. The nurse who was next to her approached, startled. "Anna? What are you talking about?" She didn't answer. She just put her hand to her abdomen. There was no pain, but a strange pressure as if something was pulsing under her skin. A memory came to her in flashes. A dark room. Voices whispering in a language she didn't understand. The feeling that her body had been invaded. Meanwhile, Julio and Mariana were taken to a private room, where the police chief was waiting. "We have security camera footage from the time Anna disappeared," he said, inserting a pen drive into the computer in the room. The video started. It showed Anna walking alone along a rural road, in the early hours of the morning in a trance. She would suddenly stop, and then the camera lights would flash. For a few seconds the image would disappear. When it came back, Anna was no longer there. "This was recorded a few kilometers from here," said the police officer. "And there is no logical explanation for what happened in the meantime." Mariana covered her mouth with her hands. Julio shook his head in disbelief. The day was slowly dawning over the city, but inside the hospital time seemed to stand still. Anna was still sleeping, sedated, under constant observation. In the neonatal ICU, the baby struggled to breathe on his own, supported by tubes, cables and machines that tried to do for him what his fragile body could not yet do. In the waiting room, Mariana had not been able to sleep. Julio paced back and forth, restless, until the door opened and the police chief returned. "We have some information," he said bluntly. Mariana jumped to her feet. "What did you find?" The police chief took a deep breath before answering. Anna was admitted to the hospital with severe abdominal pain, signs of physical trauma consistent with abuse. Old and recent injuries. The forensics are being done, but we are almost certain that the pregnancy was forced. The ground seemed to disappear beneath Mariana's feet. "Does that mean that someone?" "Yes," the police chief confirmed, his gaze hard. "Someone abused your daughter. Repeatedly. And it started long before the pregnancy." Julio held his wife, trying to keep her standing. Neither of them could speak for a few seconds. "We need to talk to Anna as soon as it is safe," the police chief continued. "But everything will be done with psychological support. The priority now is to protect her." Upstairs, Dr. Enrique was talking to the hospital's social worker and psychiatrist. The biopsy of the mass removed along with the baby was being analyzed. But what worried them most was the girl's mental state. "She may be dissociating from reality," said the psychiatrist. "It's not uncommon for children in this situation to create false memories, blockages, or even parallel worlds to cope with the pain. The thing is," interrupted the social worker, "that no one knows where Anna was during the days she disappeared without her mother noticing." Late that morning Anna woke up. She looked around, scared, not understanding where she was. She tried to get up, but her body wouldn't respond. The nurses ran and called the doctors. Mariana was taken to the room, but before she entered, the psychiatrist grabbed her by the arm. "Try not to pressure her. She'll tell you when she's ready. But you need to be prepared for what she might say." Mariana nodded, her heart heavy. She went in. Anna looked at her mother and, for the second time since giving birth, cried. "Mommy?" Mariana hugged her gently, trying to hold back her own tears. "I'm here, daughter. You're safe now." After a while of silence, Anna whispered, "I don't remember everything, but sometimes I dream. I dream of a dark room, of someone calling me. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out." Mariana closed her eyes. The pain was unbearable. "And the baby?" she asked hesitantly. Anna hesitated. Then, slowly, she put her hand to her empty belly. "He's still crying in here. Even after he came out." In the hospital's boardroom, the preliminary results of the biopsy had just arrived. Dr. Enrique read them silently, then looked up at the team. "The tissue isn't from a tumor, and it's not just a malformation. There are genetic traces there, of a second fetus. A parasitic twin possibly. But the strangest thing," he flipped through the pages, "is that this second fetus developed until about 5 months. Then it stopped. but it wasn't absorbed as normally happens. It remained there, inactive, connected to the uterus by a rudimentary vascular structure. The social worker frowned. "Are you saying she was pregnant, with two?" "In a way, yes," the doctor replied. But only one was born. The other stayed. Almost as if it was observing. And that raises a delicate question. He looked at the others. If there was more than one fetus, it's possible that there was more than one episode of violence. The silence fell like a sentence. Meanwhile, Anna looked out the bedroom window. The world outside went on, unaware of the pain she carried. And in the nursery her baby slept. Small. Fragile. Carrying on its body the mark of a silent origin, and still without a name. But Anna knew. She knew that this story hadn't started on the day of the birth. And it wouldn't end there either. 3 days had passed since the birth. Anna remained hospitalized, under observation, accompanied by psychologists, social workers and nurses who took turns day and night. The baby was stable but remained in the neonatal ICU, still fragile, fed through a tube. Mariana never left the hospital. She slept in a chair at the door of her daughter's room, as if her mere presence could protect her from everything that had already happened, and what might yet come. That morning the child psychologist sat down with Anna again. A blank notebook and colored pencils were on the table. "Do you want to draw today?" she asked, her voice soft. Anna hesitated. She picked up the blue pencil. She started with a line. Then circular lines. She didn't say anything for a few minutes. When she finished, she turned the drawing to the psychologist. It was a small room. No windows. A bed in the corner. A locked door. And a chair in the center where someone undefined, just eyes and shadow, was sitting, watching. "Does this place exist, Anna?" the psychologist asked. "That's where he took me when he said I was special," she answered without looking at anyone. The psychologist froze for a second. "Who is he?" "I don't know his name. He told me to call him Uncle." In the police chief's office, the first expert reports on Anna's body arrived with more details. Injuries of different ages, consistent with continuous abuse. Toxicology tests identified sedatives in her system, substances that may have been used to keep the girl unconscious for long periods. Julio was there, following everything. His expression hardened, his jaw clenched. "And you still don't know who did this?" he asked, restrained but with anger in his voice. "We're following some lines. We already know that Anna was missing for about 3 days. The school's data confirms that she disappeared during certain periods of the day, and was only seen when she showed up at the end of classes, close to the time she had to go back home." The police chief rubbed his temples. Then he turned the monitor to Julio. "Cameras from a gas station 80 kilometers from here show a girl with similar features getting into a white car, days after she disappeared. The driver hasn't been identified yet, but the license plate is partially visible. We're trying to track her down." Meanwhile, Anna had gone back to drawing. This time she made a crib. Inside it, a baby with closed eyes. And next to it, an adult with a mask. "He watched everything," he whispered. The psychologist remained silent. "Anna, do you remember where this place was?" "It was far away. Very far away. Sometimes the car shook a lot. But it smelled like wet earth. And sometimes, you could hear a bell." That night, Dr. Enrique went to Anna's room. He sat down next to her bed with an almost fatherly care. "Hi, Anna. How are you feeling today?" "Better, I think." He smiled gently. "Your baby is doing well. He's fighting. But he misses you." Anna looked away. "I'm afraid to look at him." "Why?" She took a while. "Because I don't know if he'll remind me of everything I've lived through, or everything I've lost." Hours later, Mariana went to the ICU to see her grandson. The nurse authorized her to approach the incubator. She placed her hand on the glass and stood there in silence. The baby opened his eyes. Mariana smiled, moved. But then something made her stop. The baby's gaze. Fixed. Direct. As if he recognized her. Mariana felt a chill. "You're going to have a different life," she whispered. "You're going to grow up surrounded by love. I promise." A police car stopped outside the hospital. The officer got out, holding an envelope. Inside, the results of a hastily performed genetic test. He stared at the data for a moment, incredulous. Then he muttered to himself, "This can't be right." He folded the envelope, took a deep breath, and went inside. Because on that sheet there was an impossible fact. The baby's DNA matched Anna's. Not as a mother, but partly. Also as a sister. The revelation of the DNA test came as a bombshell. The police chief met with the medical team and the social worker in the empty hospital cafeteria, far from the busy corridors. "The lab redid the test 3 times, he said. "The data is correct. The baby shares genetic traits with the mother, as if they were half-siblings." Silence. Dr. Enrique shook his head in disbelief. "Does this mean the aggressor could be within the family itself?" "It means we need to look within," the police chief added. "And quickly. Anna is at risk. And the baby too." The social worker looked at the doctor. "Anna still hasn't mentioned any names?" "No names," the psychologist replied. "But everything indicates that she knew who it was. There's a blockage, typical of intrafamily abuse. The child's mind protects the body. It creates labyrinths. It pretends it wasn't real. But it was." That afternoon, Anna asked to see the baby. It was the first time since the birth. Mariana accompanied her to the ICU slowly while the nurse pushed the wheelchair. When they arrived, Anna hesitated in front of the incubator. She approached. She looked at it for a while. "Does he look like me?" she asked. "A little. The nose. The chin." Anna nodded thoughtfully. "Will he grow up?" "He will. He will grow strong." She fell silent. "And will he know what happened?" "Only if you want to tell him." Anna then touched the glass gently and whispered almost inaudibly, "I don't want him to grow up afraid to close his eyes." Later, Julio was called for a private conversation with the police chief. The man seemed exhausted but firm. "Julio, we need to do a DNA test. As protocol. As Anna's father." Julio frowned. "Do you think I'm not saying anything. But the data points to a first-degree relative. We need to eliminate all possibilities. It's our obligation." Julio nodded, although his gaze was full of offense. "Do whatever you have to do. I want the truth as much as you do." That night, Anna had a nightmare. She woke up screaming. Sweaty. Mariana ran to the bedroom. She found her daughter curled up in bed, crying. "He would grab me when I was sleeping," Anna whispered repeatedly. "It's okay now, he won't get you again." But Anna looked at her mother with wide eyes. "He said that no one would believe me. That I was just a confused child. That if I told anyone, they would say it was a lie." Mariana felt the ground disappear again. "I believe you, daughter. I believe you." 2 days later, the results of Julio's DNA test came back. Negative. He was not the baby's biological father. Mariana almost collapsed with relief. But that raised another terrible question. Who else had access to Anna within the family? The police officer expanded the investigation. He began to cross-reference names, movements, previous visits. A new DNA request was made, this time for Anna's older brother, 21, who had left home months earlier after a disagreement with their father. According to school records, he had been absent for more than 40 days, the same period in which Anna had left the classroom several times, returning only when it was time to go home. Mariana, upon hearing this, froze. It took her a while to speak. "That's impossible. They grew up together. He took care of her when I was away. The words trailed off. Anna, alone in her room, was drawing again. This time she made 2 dolls. A big one smiling. A small one with tears on its face. And, in the corner of the page, a sentence she wrote in her still uncertain handwriting. He said it was love. Time stood still. Because the truth was now too close. And none of those involved were prepared for what it would bring with it. Anna's brother's DNA test was ready on a quiet Friday morning. Confirmed. Full match. The baby's biological father was the girl's own brother. The police chief wasted no time. He immediately requested a search and seizure warrant. The boy, who had moved to an uncle's house in another city, was easily located. When arrested, he offered no resistance. But he didn't confess either. Sitting in the police station in front of the police chief, he simply said, "She never said no. She liked me. It was just a joke at first." The silence in the room weighed more than the concrete. "She was 10 years old," the police chief replied firmly. "You knew what you were doing." The brother just looked down. "No one ever looked at her the way I did. I protected her. She said she loved me, that she trusted me." The police chief ended his statement there. That was enough. At the hospital, Mariana received the news with a muffled scream. She went into the bathroom and vomited. She couldn't understand. How could the boy she raised, the son she breastfed, the son she taught to ride a bike, have done that to his own sister? She sat down on the cold bathroom floor. She cried as if she was going to break down. Julio was the one who told Ana. The psychologist was there. She listened to everything in silence. The name. The confirmation. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked out the window. And then she whispered, "So I'm not crazy." The psychologist approached. "No one thought you were." Ana took a deep breath. For the first time, with some relief. "I tried to forget. I tried to pretend it was just a nightmare. But every time he came near, I felt a hole inside me." She closed her eyes. And now that hole has turned into a baby. Days later, the story spread throughout the small town. The 10-year-old girl pregnant by her own brother. Sensationalist media outlets ran headlines, ignoring the pain behind the facts. Mariana had to deactivate social media. People started showing up at the hospital door. Some out of curiosity. Others out of anger. A minority out of solidarity. The hospital increased security. Ana was transferred to a more private room. The courts acted quickly. The public prosecutor's office formalized the complaint. The young man would be charged with rape of a vulnerable person, false imprisonment, and threats. The prosecutor, in a press conference, was categorical. "This is a monstrous crime. But, unfortunately, it is not rare. Our mission now is to protect Ana and ensure that this baby does not bear the weight of the crime that created him alone." In the last scene of that day, Ana was taken to the ICU once again. The baby was already breathing without machines. She approached silently. Mariana stayed behind, respecting the space. Ana rested her forehead against the glass of the incubator. "I didn't choose you. And you didn't choose to be born this way. Pause. But if someone has to break this chain, let it be us." She smiled then for the first time. Brief, weak, but true. And there, in that moment, Ana was not just a victim. She began to become something stronger. A survivor. 6 weeks had passed since the birth. Ana was no longer hospitalized. She will be discharged, but under specific conditions. Intensive psychological monitoring, frequent visits from the social worker, and reinforced security around the residence. She did not return home. The home where everything happened was no longer safe, neither physically nor emotionally. The Child Protection Council provided a shelter for her and Mariana, in a remote neighborhood. Julio, by joint decision, stayed in the old house for a while, cooperating with the police and helping to preserve the evidence that was still being analyzed. His brother was arrested. And the case against him was moving quickly. The reports, Anna's drawings, the medical exams, the statements, everything was documented. But the doubt that no one could silence was what would be done with the baby. In the new house, small but quiet, Ana kept the bedroom with the curtains always closed. The baby's crib was there. The boy, now weighing just over 2.5 kilos, had been discharged from the neonatal ICU. He was healthy. He cried at night. He slept little. and he continued to be a mystery to his own mother. Anna looked at him as if she were looking at something sacred and profane at the same time. Mariana was the one who bathed, changed, and fed him. Anna participated, but from a distance. Until one night, after a fit of intense crying, Anna asked to hold him in her arms. Mariana, surprised, placed the baby in her arms. And for the first time, Anna didn't tremble. She stood there, rocking gently, watching the little face fall asleep. "It's not his fault, right?" she said without looking at anyone. "None at all," Mariana replied. "Then I'll try." A hearing was scheduled at the city courthouse. Presided over by a judge with a firm gaze and a maternal demeanor, the case began to be debated in depth. The prosecutor suggested suspending Anna's custody of the baby, given her age and the psychological impact. The public defender asked for sensitivity, reminding her that separating the two could reinforce the trauma. The judge listened to both of them patiently. Then she asked to speak to Anna. Alone. Sitting in an adjoining room, Anna stared at the judge with more firmness than expected from a 10-year-old girl. "You understand that taking care of a baby takes a lot, right?" "Yes. And I know I can't do it alone. So why do you want to keep him?" "Because he is all that is left of me, and because, if he grows up far away, he might think he was made by mistake. And I want him to know that he was made by survival." The judge listened, in silence, and wrote something down in her notebook. A few days later, the decision was made. Mariana would have temporary custody of the baby. Anna would remain the legal mother, but without full responsibilities until she was considered emotionally ready. The baby would grow up alongside them, in a supervised environment with psychological support and frequent visits from a protection network. It was the only possible compromise. Neither punishment nor abandonment. In the last scene of the night, Anna sat next to the crib. The baby was sleeping. She drew with a lit flashlight. A sun. A house. A girl with braids. And a baby in her arms. This time no shadows. No closed doors. Just the light coming in through the window. The news spread quickly throughout the city. Despite the judicial secrecy, leaked information reached social media and chat rooms in distorted form. The full names were not revealed, but the girl pregnant by her brother had become a symbol, for some of horror, for others of resistance. At school, Anna's name caused whispers among teachers and classmates. She had not yet returned to in-person classes, but the Guardianship Council was already talking to the principal about her gradual reintegration. The principal, a pragmatic woman, was clear in the meeting. The school needs to welcome but also prepare. Children don't know how to deal with this. And parents, even less so. The school's psychologist suggested a gradual return plan. Workshops, discussion groups, and the presence of a mediator in the first few days. Because Anna, despite everything, was still just a child trying to return to the world. At home, the baby was starting to respond to stimuli. He was already smiling. He was already recognizing Anna's voice. She, in turn, got a little closer each day. She fed him. She held him in her arms. She slept with the crib next to the bed. But above all, she looked at him with firmer eyes. It was no longer just pain. Now there was also a strange kind of affection that grew slowly, as if planted in the most arid soil. Meanwhile, the case against her brother moved forward. At the initial hearing, he appeared handcuffed. I avoid looking at the family. Julio was present. Mariana was not. She decided she did not want to see her son. Anna did not go either, but she wrote a letter. A short one. She gave it to the judge. The judge read it in silence. And before closing the session, she quoted the girl's words. I do not want revenge. I just want him to never again have the power to erase someone like he almost erased me. The prosecution requested the maximum sentence for rape of a vulnerable person, aggravated by blood ties. The defense tried to argue emotional instability, claiming no violent intent. The judge interrupted. The absence of screams is not the absence of violence. A child does not need to bleed to be destroyed. The trial was postponed to the next phase. But the weight of the sentence was already in the air. The following week, Anna returned to school. It was just one morning. Her mother left her at the door, holding tightly to her light blue backpack. The hallways seemed bigger, the stairs more intense. But she walked to the classroom. She sat down. She breathed. The Portuguese teacher handed out a text interpretation activity. And Anna, pencil in hand, scribbled something in the corner of the sheet that was not asked. She wrote a word. Back. It was not about erasing what had happened. It was about continuing despite everything. That night, lying next to the crib, Anna spoke softly to the baby. One day they will tell you how you were born. But I promise that you will also know how we lived later. And for the first time she fell asleep with the little one pressed against her chest. In the silence of the night, two light breaths mingled as if they were learning to exist together. Anna's story does not end with a full stop. It continues, between pauses and ellipses, as lives marked by traumas that cannot be erased but can little by little be transformed do. The city may continue to comment, speculate and judge. But there, in the depths of what really matters, Anna chose not to be remembered only for what she suffered, but for what she built from it. Her path will not be simple nor fair in all its stretches. But by returning to school, by taking care of her son, by writing that solitary word in the corner of the page, Anna took an essential step. She claimed the right to start over. And sometimes starting over doesn't need applause. Just space, time, and the courage to take a deep breath and move forward. Stories like Anna's remind us that life doesn't always allow for easy choices, but it's still possible to find ways back. Paths that don't erase the pain but that build meaning from it. If this story touched you in any way, leave a like. This helps the channel to continue bringing stories that deserve to be heard. Share in the comments what you felt while following this journey. Your voice also matters and can be a support for others who go through similar silences. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe now so you don't miss the next stories. In the description there's an even more impactful video. Watch it later, it may bring another perspective that will make sense to you.